Hi HR Nation, it's Chris Rainey. Welcome to episode 55 of HR Leaders, the show where we interview today's most successful and innovative HR practitioners 5 days a week. Today we have a very special guest, someone I've been wanting to speak to for a while. I'm joined by Sanyin Siang. Sanyin is a CEO advisor and executive director of Duke University's Fuqua Coach K Center of Leadership and Ethics. I made it, Sanyin. I got through the title. Also someone that I follow religiously on LinkedIn and is a great influencer on there. If you don't know who she is, then I'll definitely go and check her out. She's also the author of The Launch Book, which is motivational stories. Yeah, there it is. To launch your ideas, business, or next career. Sanyin, welcome to the show. How are you?
Oh, Chris, thank you so much for having me on this show. I love your spirit. I love your podcasts. On LinkedIn, you had just recently posted a video about your 50th episode. And I love what you say in there, which is about, it's in the spirit of giving back. When we have knowledge, let's amplify it, let's share it with others so we can continue to make that positive impact on the world.
Perfect. Tell our listeners, for the very small amount of people that don't know you, tell our listeners a little bit about yourself and your journey to where we are today.
Let's see. Let me start off with my mission in life, because I believe everyone, if we know what our mission in life is, that makes the pivots and turns in our journey a lot more manageable, And so I've discovered years ago is not to chase greatness, but it's to enable greatness. And when you think about it, chasing greatness, you can't control the outcomes all the time. I mean, we're in a complex world, but you can control enabling greatness and helping others discover their superpowers and be their best. So that's been a consistent theme throughout my life, whether as a educator, as a CEO coach, as a mother, as a parent. And in my role, my life journey, so I graduated with an engineering degree, didn't quite know what I wanted to do with my life except wanted to help people, and ended up at the American Association for the Advancement of Science in Washington, D.C., where my job was to look at the ethical and legal implications and social implications of scientific advances before they even happened. Now, the main thing about how that job applies to my current job today is, in order to understand the big picture of those implications, you have to bring together people who were never together in the same room before. A diversity of perspectives, religious leaders, media, policymakers, scientists, lawyers, to really understand the issue. And a lot of what I do today is I love weaving together ideas and people, as you do, from all different industries, find the patterns and help them become even better by learning and sharing and connecting with one another.
Where did you start your career? Did you think you would end up doing what you're doing now? Was that always planned out?
This is what I tell my students. I think this applies to my career as well, to all of our careers. The jobs, what I share with my students is the type of jobs you're going to be in 2 years from now probably don't even exist yet. And so when I started off after graduation, I would never in a million years imagine that something like this type of role would exist, And then in terms of what drives me personally, so I was born in Taiwan and emigrated to the US when I was 7. And so I'm a first-gen immigrant. And I think when you are first-gen anything, you're never fully a member of your former community, nor are you fully a member of your new community. So you're always in that in-between. And psychological survival is based on your ability to really step into everyone else's shoes and be that weaver, that integrator. And so that's been a lifelong theme. And in my life today, since we had talked about integrating our work and personal lives. So as a mom, that's my number one job. Actually, can I say that today? Like as a professional, because my number one job is a mom.
There's no more important job.
I want to start off this podcast with talking about my number one job as a parent, because parenting, becoming a mom has actually helped me become a better leader. Because you talk about having 3 other siblings, and there was 4 of you, 4 kids in your household. And what I discovered, there's 3 I have 3 kids, age 8 and under. And one thing with kids is positional power means nothing. In order to influence them, you actually have to understand each one of them as an individual and be able to see things from their point of view, and then start from where they are and move them forward. And so an idea I've been thinking about a lot recently is, in the HR world, what if we treated our employees more like family members, and this idea where give them a sense where they feel like they can all belong, and understanding what special talents they have and placing them in the right roles for the full expression of that talent for the organization, for society. I know you believe this too, that the most powerful assets in our organization are the people assets. That's why the chief HR officer role and people officer role is such a critical one, because any strategy is not going to have a great chance of succeeding unless it's aligned with the talent, the culture, and the capabilities. And those are all hooked around people.
Yeah. Unless people are engaged in the strategy, then it's just going to fall flat very quickly. I think the easy part is the strategy. Anyone can come up with a strategy. We spend so much attention and time focusing on the strategy, but no one really thinks about the execution. And it's not, and the execution is not, a week, a month, a year long. It's an ongoing. Building that culture and sustaining that culture is just an everyday task, not just a one-off workshop you have to have, or a piece of work you need to do within the business. And that's why HR is so important. They're the ones that tell the story of the business, right, to the rest of the organization.
Storytelling is so key, because culture. I mean, culture is one of the top things I hear about from chief executives about what one of the major biggest opportunities and also biggest challenges. And we think, I've seen so many mission statements and here are values, and those are very pretty words. What I'm keenly interested in is how do we get granular and create the organizational habits so that the people not only know what those values are, but they also feel it, so they
live it.
And live it. Exactly. More and more people are recognizing that, because we're in a complex ecosystem non-linear world. And this is a world where there's also war for talent, and understanding you have to create something that people are inspired by. And in order to do that, it goes back to the why. It also goes to articulating the meaning behind the company. So you take, I remember this Mark Geary. He is a CEO of a company that works with helping create cancer, solving the cancer, curing cancer. And so in his company, what you would do is when you walk in, there would be huge posters of people, and they were brought in by their various employees. And those posters are pictures of people whom the employees know, who are cancer survivors. And they say, this is why I'm here. And that's a wonderful way of injecting meaning. Because I
see that every day on the way into work.
It's we're in a meaning deficit type of world. And so for one thing we wonderful is to think also, how do we create and how do we communicate the meaning behind our companies? Because that's ultimately more soulful, and people respond to soul. Are we getting too fluffy here?
No, of course not. No, this is the whole point. I wanted to show, to have a conversation. I remember the first time I saw the Simon Sinek Start With Why presentation, and it just literally for the rest of the week, I was sitting at my desk, thinking, this is when I was employed by a big corporate events company, and I was thinking, why am I here? I couldn't, and I realized there was no purpose for the business apart from making money. And that can't be your purpose. No one's going to get out of bed every morning and do what you do for the purpose of revenue. We will have bills to pay, don't get me wrong. We'll have mortgages and stuff like that, but that's not a driver for me, getting out of bed every day is I know that the conversations we're having now and the conversations that I have with the leaders all over the world can have an impact on potentially hundreds of thousands of employees. That is my why, and that's me worth getting out of bed every day and doing what we do. And then since I've thought about that, everything we do is with that. But why? We have crazy meetings where even my team members are like, but why, Chris? I've trained them too well. They're like, why? And I'm like, yeah, it's true. Maybe we should be doing that. And so, yeah. No. So what skills, in your experience, what skills do we need to be a successful leader?
So there's some core skills that have never changed since the beginning of time, right? So you think about universal human desires, the desire to belong, the desire for a little bit of control, the desire to satiate one's curiosity. And so leaders, they have to be credible. They have to be able to communicate vision. They have to have expertise. They also have to have character. That I don't mean character as in personality, I mean integrity and values, because that's why people want to follow you. The ability to build trust. And by trust, it's beyond being trustworthy, because that's along the lines of your expertise and competence and character. It's being able to understand your follower, those whom you're trying to influence, their point of view. And understand, demonstrate to them that you care about them and you understand. There's a great quote that goes, they won't care what you know unless they know that you care. And that is so true. And I think about that as building trust. So those have always been the core requirements from the beginning of time. Now in this complex VUCA world, volatile, uncertain, chaotic, ambiguous world, there's also some new requirements layered on top of that. So 10, 20 years ago, we're in a very linear world where it was command and control, decisions have to run up and down the chain of command. Everything was hubbed around the core of the company. But in today's world, it's more of an ecosystem world where we shouldn't look only at first order effects, but the second, third, fourth order effects of a decision may actually have just as tremendous consequence down the line as the first order effects. So how do you understand that? You have to be able to pull in from all parts of the ecosystem, from the edges as well as the core. And that involves, because there's not enough time for decisions to go up and down the chain of command anymore, that involves more empowering others throughout the organization and actually doubling down on building trust, because I think when you have that trust where you know your people's capabilities and you know their aspirations and it's aligned with the culture and the values, then you can enable them to fly. Right?
Yeah.
And decisions, there's no way if you're a global company that you know what's happening on the ground 2,000 miles away. You're relying on that talent who's on the ground. And so empower them, but also give them the support and the context for this is the box that we're operating in for a decision.
And having worked with some of these leaders, what are the biggest challenges that you see that they face in this new order that we're in right now?
Time is, it's the number one thing that I hear. How do you stretch time? How do you create more time? How do you, there's more things that, you think about before, when things were just written via fax or letter, you have that time to respond. Now it's not even just email, like someone's on social media, and time gets compressed. And so the biggest challenge, how do you have the time to also develop? Because one of the leaders' jobs, every person in the organization should actually ideally also have a mentorship mindset, right, for the organization to succeed. And so how do you create the time that you are also developing your successors and developing those around you? Because that's what a healthy organization is. Everyone is mentoring, everyone's developing each other, and through that also developing themselves. That takes time while responding to the incredible increasing demands. So that's one of the biggest challenges.
Yeah.
One of my the things I learned from General Martin Dempsey, who was the 18th chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff in the United States, is he would actually carve out time in his calendar that would be blocked off for reflection, for reading, for learning. And I think not enough leaders prioritize that.
On that point of time, because obviously time seems to be everyone's enemy at the moment, do you think that technology has made that more difficult? Because of social media, because of, as you said, you could take some time in the past to reply to a letter or a fax, but now the CEOs must be inundated, leaders must be inundated, because the speed of people expect results quicker now and faster than ever before. And also the technology available to get hold of people is also expanded.
I think technology has presented new challenges, but it's also presented new opportunities. The key is being intentional about how you use that technology, right? Because when you think about now with my mobile device, I can now arrive at places without getting lost. So it's just true. And look at my calendar or
post on LinkedIn.
Or LinkedIn.
Post on LinkedIn.
And so in many ways, this has saved me time. But in other ways, it's also created an inundation, compressed time. And so the key, it goes back to understanding the purpose and understanding why, that intentionality about how to leverage that technology is how you can, it's a difference between it either burying you in just all those responses you need, or actually facilitating you to scale, to scale yourself and scale your time. So I think it goes back to intentionality. But going back to this idea of a quick, minimal time, maximum effectiveness, I would also count two things in terms of broadening your perspectives. Besides LinkedIn and reading and podcasts. And one is the human interaction.
No one forgets about that.
I get so much of my information and my knowledge broadening from people. Like just in our conversation prior to the podcast, I've already learned so many new things. And that was short. In a short period of time, I'm able through mentorship, being able to leapfrog years, a gap in experience, and glean it's already curated knowledge base, right? And then the second thing is, and this is why I love coaching, is through coaching. As a coach, what I do is it's helping people see their blind spots and then be able to pinpoint a behavior. The type of coaching I do is based off of Marshall Goldsmith, who is a mentor of mine, stakeholder-centered coaching, and that's around you pinpoint a blind spot behavior, focus on that behavior, and then leverage the people, your stakeholders around you, to help you be better at that behavior. And that's about designed to minimize the amount of time to be maximally effective later on.
Yeah. In what you do in your field, what's something that you're obsessed with right now?
Culture.
What's one? Yeah.
Culture. Yeah, culture. So one of the things, it's that problem that I think we started off this conversation with is, you talk to a lot of chief executives and they know what their values are, and they say it's this. And I know the top layer all get it, the second layer, third layer, but what happens between those layers and the person on the front lines, where that culture gets dissipated. And so to me, it's not only about intentionally articulating what your culture is, but it's also being relentlessly disciplined in creating the types of organizational habits that will undergird the expression, the living, the feeling of that culture. And so one idea I've been playing with is, it's hard to control people, right? But it's easier as a leader, the role of a leader is to control the environment. And it's like, I go back to parenting. If I want my kids to eat healthy, I'm not, it's not going to
Don't
be
have
as
sweets everywhere.
effective. Yeah, sweet everyone, so please eat healthy. That's
Yeah.
our, but if I have healthy food everywhere, then I can control the environment. I can control how they act, but I can control the environment that facilitates them to make the right type of choices. And I think, so I've been very interested in how do we control environment using the five senses. So most of the time we talk about culture in words, it's verbally, or written, but are we using visual symbols? Are we using visual symbols enough? And I remember a few years ago, I was interviewing Melody Hobson, and I walked into her office, and she was at that time the president of Aerial Capital. And in that office, there were, like, she was wearing a turtle pin on her lapel. There were like little turtle statues everywhere, posters. And I asked her, why are there so many turtles around? This is a financial services firm. It's one of the largest African-American owned asset management firm. Why are there turtles? And she said, slow and steady wins the race. That's our motto. And so
Wow.
seeing it, you don't even have
Embodied
to
it.
say
She
it.
embodied it, basically. Yeah.
Exactly.
Around her.
So I'm concerned with like the visual, even the audio. The other thing I'm deeply interested in while I'm working on this year is around the idea of organizational continuity. So we talk about disruption and we talk about innovation, but when you think about it, even though people may say, we should innovate and we should be disrupted, at the end of the day, we're all so fearful of change, right? And you think about, and so there's so many innovation and disruption initiatives. Why don't they get beyond um, the point of the beautiful strategy? Was because at the end of the day, you have to think about the person who's actually implementing it. They're thinking, wow, it's not, does this mean I have to chuck skills that made me successful and learn new ones? What does this mean for my new role? I mean, there's a lot of fear that goes into that. And so unless we also address those fear and turn them into hope and excitement and dreams, those initiatives, well, and so you step back and you think about what is the end goal of innovation and disruption. They're not the end goal, right? The end goal is actually survival, organizational continuity. And so I've been thinking about, what goes into that organizational continuity. And it's these three things. One is creating a mentorship mindset throughout every single person in the organization, so that when we have a revolving door of talent, at least that dampens the risk of that because mentorship is not only knowledge transfer, but also transferring the norms and values of the organization. Two is, I know we hear a lot about diversity and inclusion. That's great. Diversity of perspectives, diversity of backgrounds. But unless you have someone who is a integrator, who can cross-pollinate and draw on those different ideas and weave them together, we won't be able to maximize that diversity of perspectives and backgrounds as much. And then the third, so it's the mentor, the integrator, and the third aspect of that is, it goes back to what we talk about, feel. When you have on a sports team, when you have chemistry on a team, this is one famous coach once said this, when you have chemistry on the team, it's like having another superstar on that team. And yet we don't spend enough time focusing on how do we create that chemistry? How do we create that community bond? And so it's having someone on the team who is also a glue person. Now these roles the mentor, the glue, the integrator, we can find them in different stratas of the organization because there's people who play them. But right now it's randomized, right? It's sort of like by luck that we will have a person who does those roles. And I'm interested in, to create organizational continuity, how do we intentionally call out these roles and actually incentivize people who play these roles and say that these are vitally important. So those are and the third thing is, of course, always parenting and leadership. that's my life at home, right?
Yeah, of course.
I'll share with you an interesting insight recently that actually comes from parenting. I know it's in my parenting is in my head a lot.
And because you do it
So
every day, like you're a full-time parent, so you're always going to be thinking about these things, right?
So my children and I, we got this little Ozobot. It's a little robot that we went into a store one day, Barnes and Noble actually, and they're demonstrating it. And it's this little robot that has a light sensor, and so it can read color, and based on the colors, do certain things. So you see red, green, red. It does a whirl to the right, and blue, purple, black. It does a whirl to the left. That sort of thing. And we got it because I thought, how cool. And one of the things my children, they were saying go or turn, and it wasn't doing anything. So I said, actually, you have to learn the robot's code. And there's a little booklet that shows all the different codes. And my daughter, my oldest, was then very studious about learning those codes. And I thought, wait a minute, you know what? You can yell at this robot all you want, and it's not going to do what you want it to do unless you learn its code. The same way that you can ask your sister or brother to do what you want, but they're not going to do it unless you understand their code. And yet, why is it that we spend, right now in our society, coding is so important. Like help our children learn coding and STEM, which is important, but why are we not also spending as much time in teaching them to read the human code, understanding the code of each individual, that's their drivers and motivations and hopes and dreams and fears, because that's how those innovation initiatives will be successful, is based upon our understanding and building that trust with the people who are actually going to be implementing it on the ground.
Before we wrap up, that leads us quite nicely on to our quickfire round.
Oh, there's a quickfire round.
Quickfire round. Well, basically, I'm going to ask you 5 questions, and you have no longer than 30 seconds to give us some amazing answers.
This is a little bit scary. Okay.
No pressure. I'm sure you'll be fine. What was the number one thing that was holding you back from becoming a leader in your field?
I didn't think I could be.
What's the best piece of business advice that you've ever received?
Invest in your people.
What's one book that you'd recommend and why?
Right now I'm reading Radical Inclusion by my wonderful friends, General Marty Dempsey and Ori Brofman. And then the other book is actually the launch book, I hope.
You have to call out your own book. It's fine.
Well, launch is really about how do you wrestle with change. And then Radical Inclusion is how do you lead in a world that has competing narratives. And Radical Inclusion is coming out March 6th. Launch is really available on Amazon and at WH Smith stores everywhere.
Perfect. And could you share one internet resource that you use to keep up to date with current events?
Yes, LinkedIn.
How did I guess that you were going to say that? No problem. Well, look, I really appreciate you taking the time to join us. I've really thoroughly enjoyed our conversation. It was great to have you on here. If there's one piece of advice that you could give other leaders out there, what would that be?
Take the time to make sure that things with your family and the people you love are going really well. Invest in those relationships, because if things aren't going well there, nothing else will. And at the end of your days, are you going to look back and say, gosh, I wish I had made one more sales call. Gosh, I wish I had worked one more hour. Or are you going to say, I wish I had spent more time with my mom or dad. I wish I had spent more time with my best friend. So my advice to leaders everywhere is, when you invest in the relationships that are deeply valuable to you, your marriage, your children, your family, and friends who have been with you through thick and thin, then things will have a better shot of going well.
Fantastic. Well, look, guys, make sure you head over to hrleaders.com. There you'll find all of the show notes of what we're talking about. There's going to be probably a lot of show notes now because we've been talking about a lot. All the links to everything we've mentioned, also linked to your book, which I'm really excited to read. So thank you for that. And I wish you all the best until we next speak.
Thank you, Chris.